Hello and welcome back to Just Another Paid Promotion, where we give an honest and humorous review of popular sponsorships on the platform. To celebrate the success of this channel, we finally get the online therapy service BetterHelp. These videos are not sponsored, so it would really mean a lot if you consider liking and subscribing.
Genshin Impact is an open-world action RPG game available on PC, Android, iOS, and PlayStation 4 and 5. Step into a vast magical world now and start your adventure on the continent of combat, where 7 kinds of elements.
Well, since the world's soul has been sucked up by the great Dougal in the sky, everything is so depressing that there's no real point to going to therapy anymore. Since I don't have to go now, I might as well try the game he's talking about. It can't be that bad.
Yeah, Paimon
Ah, sh**. It's gonna be one of those games. Genshin Impact is a free-to-play open-world action RPG. It was released in 2020 and developed by Chinese-based studio QuiLliXs. Their bread and butter is free-to-play anime-style games, which have all been pretty frequent sponsorships on the platform, but for today we'll be looking at the game that started it all. Genshin may not be as widespread of a sponsor as something like Squarespace, but they've left a mark by sponsoring some of the bigger channels on the website, which has not really went well for many fan bases. For how much praise and love this game gets, there's as much hatred towards it as well. Apparently it's because of how addicting it is, and supposedly having a very cursed fan base, which definitely led to some people being disappointed in creators for taking them as a sponsor.
He's a molester! He's a child molester! Ah! 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 You better run! You liar!
But because of their sponsorships for massive YouTubers and mixed reception, it makes Genshin Impact one of the most provocative subjects I've reviewed. But since the world's soul has been sucked up by a 1960s British stop-motion dog promoting the game, I guess it's finally time to give this game a shot. This is Genshin Impact. We open up on the beach and are given some exposition. Apparently we fell into this world called Taviont, and when we try to get back home, we encounter this god that calls herself the Sustainer of Heavenly Principles. We defend against her attacks and are given the choice to either play as Ether or Lumen. After we pick one and give them a custom name, the goddess traps the other sibling in this cube. We try to save them, but we're unable to, and she sends us away. Our main goal for the game is to save our sibling and get back home. After the exposition, we're introduced to FUCK! This is Paimon. She's the game's mascot, who becomes our companion for the entire game. She's very similar to Navi from Ocarina of Time, with being able to guide and speak with us, but somehow even more annoying than Navi. Instead of just a simple, hey listen, she's fully voice acted, and no hate towards the voice actress, but she has this really annoying voice that gets really irritating. Yet in cutscenes she talks the most, with dialogue trying to be cute but just comes off so forced. Honestly, if I was on the beach and Paimon wanted to be my guide, I would just act dead.
Yeah, Paimon really owes you for that. Otherwise, Paimon likely would have drowned. So Paimon will do her best to be a great guide.
After we meet Paimon, we're able to learn the controls. Then we walk over this hill and are introduced to the world of Taviont. And this is just Breath of the Wild. Yeah, this game takes a lot from another Zelda game, Breath of the Wild, from the glider, the stamina mechanics, the slightly sci-fi temples, to even the more cel-shading look. Actually, QuiLliXs did admit that they were heavily inspired by Breath of the Wild, in particular the open world, but years later they also stated that the constant comparisons to Breath of the Wild, and many thinking it was just a clone of it, did leave a toll on the developers. I don't think people should be even more stressed at their jobs, but I do think some of the comparisons are fair when you take this much stuff. Like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with being inspired, but then there's just taking, because this feels a little bit more than just being inspired. But I would also agree, it's not really stealing either. Genshin Impact does have a massive open world that has some areas that are visually similar to the ones from Breath of the Wild, but it's a lot more structured like a traditional open world game, with set missions and side quests, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. There are some great games that use this structure, but is Genshin Impact better than the newer Zelda games? One thing that is very different from the Zelda games is the combat. I don't play a lot of RPGs, so this comparison might be totally wrong, but the third-person perspective and the focus on having multiple characters kind of reminded me of the Tales games with the camera angles of the newer Final Fantasy games, but nowhere near as good as those games. The combat is dull. Not including the dash, there's 3 combat buttons, a normal attack, an elemental attack, that takes a few seconds to charge, and an elemental special, which every character has a unique one. That sounds really cool, but after playing the game only a little bit, the flashiness wears off and it just doesn't become fun anymore. Like, yeah, the controls mostly work, they're not bad, but they're lifeless. There were way too many times where I spammed the normal attack button and won. Most of the fights just feel like you're pressing buttons, and you're only going faster if your level is higher. Which, yeah, that's technically most games, but when that's what you feel, it makes battling in these fights boring. And oh my gosh, I wish they also stole the Z targeting button from Zelda as well, because there were way too many times where my attack aimed to a different enemy than I was hitting, and it takes a second to target back to the enemy you were initially hitting. A majority of third-person action games have a Z targeting system, so it feels a little awkward that it's missing here. One thing I do like about the combat is some of the features of the elemental powers. Each character has at least one of 7 elemental powers, which allows them to have moves and specials based off that element. That's okay, but what's really interesting is that if you switch characters, you can mix elemental powers for unique moves, like mixing ice and water to freeze an enemy. And even individually, the characters can have elemental powers that can still affect the enemies in interesting ways. Like having fire burning a wooden shield. It's not a fully original idea, but it definitely makes the combat have a little bit more depth to it. I just wish that the elements were the major focus of the combat. It is a little bit later in the game, but the main focus is still just pressing buttons. I just wish there were more creative elemental combos, because right now the combat just feels like a button masher. Now, since we already mentioned the characters' abilities, another feature of the game is the large roster of characters. When doing research for this video, most people online either loved the character designs or thought they were too whitewashed, with some characters apparently having a skin color that was way too white, quite literally. Now, this section is probably going to be the most subjective part of this whole video, but personally I think the designs are fine. Most of them just feel like generic anime tropes, and a couple designs are a bit too over the top. Which, yeah, I know that's coming from me, the guy that has a poster of an almost naked anime cat girl, but a lot of the designs in Genshin Impact are a tad soulless. I think it might have to do with the eyes. Some of the characters have this really blank expression that makes them look like they're dead inside. You can also tell the designers tried to, highlight certain features, but I actually really like a couple of the character designs, with my absolute favorite being Kaeya. I actually like his blue and purple color scheme, and his design actually shows his personality, so he doesn't look dead inside. Most of the time the character designs can look bland, but they have a few glimpses of being charming. Oh god, not like that!
What you looking at, perv?
However, you can only get a few characters throughout the story. The rest are behind one of the most controversial parts of Genshin Impact, and the reason why apparently it's so addicting. The gacha mechanics! If you want a specific character, you have to spend this currency called Fate. You click one of these billboards, and you get this animation of a blue shooting star, and then it reveals what you got. It could be the character you wanted, but it can also be a different character, or more likely, it's probably just going to be a weapon, or even more likely, it's going to be a weapon that's not that good. If you press the button to spend 10 fates at once, it says it guarantees that you'll get one thing that's a higher star count, which determines how good the item or character is, and you'll be able to tell by the shooting star that's purple, but if you only use the option to use one fate, it may take a while to get a purple shooting star, and if you eventually get one, it doesn't necessarily mean you'll get what you wanted. This is basically gambling. The outcome is always randomized, and with the ability to buy fates through a currency you gotta spend real money on, makes the system closer to something you'd see from a casino. Now, I know what some people are gonna say. Well, that's not real gambling. You don't have to buy fates. You can play through the game and get primo gems, and then you can exchange them for fates. Which, to be fair, I did get a few characters this way, but that was because of A, I didn't realize you can spend primo gems until hours in, so I was able to spend all of them at once. B, this game really wants you to keep playing, and one of the ways it does that is to offer you free primo gems. And C, after all those means were exhausted, I just grinded for hours, and then getting a bunch of gear I didn't want just for a few characters, with one being pretty easy to obtain. And with the other characters I got, they were fine, but not the ones I really wanted. You need about 160 primo gems to get one fate, and you only get about 5 primo gems if you do certain things around the map, and they always have these special events where they have a character for a limited time, so you either have to grind in that time period, have a bunch of primo gems saved up, or spend real money, and you still gotta be lucky. If it was just skins like CSGO, yeah, that's still a pretty addicting system, but it being characters that have unique playstyles that are heavily marketed for only a limited time, that's much worse. Actually, Hoyoverse had to pay $20 million to the FTC for selling loot boxes to children and collecting their data, so now you can't make in-game purchases if you're under 16 unless you have a guardian, and they did have to delete data for users under 13. But they still have data for players over 14. Also, Genshin has been criticized for not having great security, so I know the stuff monetization is common practice for free-to-play games, and there are full-price games that have these practices as well, but that doesn't mean Genshin should be off the hook. It's nearly impossible to unlock everything for free unless you spend thousands of hours, and most of these characters are timed events, so it's triggering scarcity tactics. People have wasted serious money on this game. Just because it's free doesn't make the use of gacha practices less predatory. I wish Genshin would just have a battle pass system, which there technically is one, but simply it's very bad. I know battle passes have been overdone, and it has made some games worse, but Genshin Impact is designed to be played for hours. Just charge $20 to $30, give like 3 to 5 characters and a bunch of weapons, and make the player unlock them with unique side missions. It would actually be better gameplay wise and morally, because right now, you basically have to go for a slot machine that can be free if you grind a lot. If not, pay up. One thing that is really good about the game is the music, which is headed by Chen. He's a composer who mostly does television and films, and you can really tell because the music of Genshin has a really big grandness to it. A lot of the music is actually performed by some highly established orchestras around the world. I've been using a lot of the music in this video. It's a really nice soundtrack. It's probably the only part of Genshin I would call genuinely great. But some of the tracks do sound like they're from Zelda. I've been mostly showing the PC version, but there's a few ports for the game. While I'm recording this, it's on iOS, Android, PlayStation 4 and 5, and the Xbox Series consoles. It is a crunchy looking game on mobile. It's not as detailed as something you can see on the home console, but this is still the full Genshin Impact experience. Finally, a game that fits my surroundings. I thought the reason why the combat wasn't great and lacking a Z targeting system was because it had to be on the phone, But even on mobile, the combat just feels lifeless, and they could have totally had a button to change enemies. Also, this game works better with a controller. It's fine with a touchscreen, and I think it works better than something like the GTA games on mobile. But the game feels more natural with real buttons. Hitting the screen over and over can be really irritating. If you bring the game outside, either bring a wireless controller with you, or better yet, just don't play it and enjoy your surroundings. Okay, we got really ahead of ourselves. Let's go through the story. The worst thing about this game is not the combat, it's not Paimon, not the questionable character designs, not even the gacha mechanics. It's that the game is so After I got to level 20, I realized that this game is not interesting. And certain parts of the story, you have to be a high enough level, which means the pacing drags on. The gameplay loop is not that fun. Most of it is walking around, slowly grinding XP, finding enemies, which are usually the same ones over and over, get their chest, fight the occasional boss, which they also repeat, then find a teleporter. The same for hours and hours, which yeah, I know that's what happens with most games, where it's the same gameplay loop for a long time. But the reason why most great games work at their core is that the gameplay loop is good to begin with. That you can still have fun playing with it even years after you stop playing it initially. Genshin Impact, even after 15 minutes, I want to stop playing. The core gameplay is either walking or teleporting to an area, so it can be a slightly involved button masher, and not a great one at that. This video was supposed to be the 5th episode of Just Another Paid Promotion, right after Display. It's been almost a year since I've released that video. After 2 weeks of on and off playing, I just dropped the game. I didn't want to keep experiencing it. It's not the worst game I've ever played, but it's so empty inside. When initially playing the game, I had no clue why so many people were apparently addicted to it. Like, really? This is your addiction? This? Even though I've made fun of it in the past, I get why League of Legends is addicting. There's so many unique characters, there's competitive and cooperative play, and there's so many ways to tackle the same map. In Genshin, like, yeah, there's stuff to do, but it's mostly the same typical stuff in any open world game, or it's just not that fun to play. The reason why people are probably addicted to it is just because of the gacha mechanics, and yeah, that's still a big problem. And I still think, just because other games are monetized like this, doesn't mean Genshin should be off the hook. But oh my gosh, I've experienced this crap way too much. I've seen the same type of hyper monetization before, so every time I see it, I just think it's lazy. Why should I care about spending money in this game when hundreds of other games are also trying to take my money as well? Now, I don't think people who are sponsored by Genshin Impact are bad people. Predatory mobile games are a common sponsor on the platform, but having hard proof that Genshin was targeting children, and knowing that some of these channels have a big chunk of their fanbase being children, I think it's fair to question creators when selling games like these. It doesn't make them bad people, but they should be more mindful on what they're selling to their fanbase. Genshin has these daily challenges that can help you gain experience points and primo gems, and I hated doing these! They were the same couple missions over and over. Just go over here, beat these group of enemies, or help this villager for about like 4 times, then go back to town and collect your reward. It's such a time waster. It just makes the game a chore. I do like the look of the world. It reminded me of old online kids games, which yeah, I know that's saying something, but it can look really nice. And I do like how some of the towns are based off Chinese architecture, but it can be a bore to walk around. Most of the memorable areas are just the towns, but the rest of the world is good looking, but it's way too big and there's not a lot of stuff you can do in it, or at least anything that's original to Genshin. One location I do like is the Spiral Abyss. It's the most difficult part of the game. It involves going through these floors, which each one has 3 chambers that have a different objective to complete, which get harder and harder. Just like the rest of the game, it's not the most original idea, but it brings a good challenge, and it actually makes the combat more interesting, even though most of the scenarios feel the same, and it's definitely more of a cool bonus, instead of something that makes the game great. Like most RPGs, you're able to level up your characters to be stronger, but after only a few hours, you stop leveling up the way how a majority of RPGs work, aka gaining XP from fights. It becomes you need these books to level up, and you do get some books in fights, particularly in bosses, but most of them come from exploring the map, which can be counterintuitive when you have to go into areas with higher level enemies. And there's 3 types of books, which is a bit tedious, and you still have multiple characters to level up, so in a different way you still have to grind. There's nothing wrong with having an item level up your character, but having it as your main way of leveling up is stupid. It just feels like the use of books was a way to fill up more time. Genshin is trying its damnness to be a forever game. Most of the complaints I had were probably intentional, so people can waste as much time as possible, without needing the gameplay to evolve that much, which has definitely worked on some people, but for me at least, the padded out runtime was just too much. Again, it's not the worst game. There was a few times I enjoyed my time with it, and gameplay wise, looking at it technically, it's not bad. The controls work, it performs well, and it's well animated, but when I got to the bottom of it, it was just a drag to still play. I'm guessing the reason why people love Genshin Impact is its story. I've been told in comments when I've teased this video that this is a deeply emotional story with great characters and some incredibly rich lore.
What are you talking about?
This is just a typical fantasy story with some anime tropes. Its plot's not a way to tell a really well written opus. It's not even just basically a playable version of a TV show, or even something entertaining to see unfold. It's just a means to meet new characters, get from one place to another, lore dumps, experience the most annoying dialogue, and then set up the next chapter. There's some moments where it's trying to be emotional, but it's not really well deserved. The plot is just to continue the not really interesting gameplay, not to tell this grand story. Now, there's some great games where the story isn't really a masterpiece, but if it has strong and likable characters, or just ones that are interesting, that can be good enough. A good example of this is the Gravity Rush games. They're not bad stories by any means, but they fall more into episodic situations, so it can serve the gameplay. But the characters by themselves can be really entertaining, so it makes the plot more enjoyable. Even though all the characters are visually interesting, but as written characters, Genshin takes simple to a whole new level. They're all flat and generic, that it feels like their personalities are just TV trope pages. All the voice actors do a good job, but what they read is the most stale, done-to-death anime dialogue. It's like a Fire Emblem or Tales game, but less charming and even cringier. You could say that those games also have characters that are just their tropes, but they give time to show their characters to develop and change, like a story's supposed to. In Genshin Impact, when you're finally able to play the story, it's just a group of cardboard cutouts playing an anime edition of D&D, and the board master is a giant slot machine. There's also lore, which people seem to get really into. And listen, I'm not one of those guys who gets really into lore. I might get some people upset with this, but lore is only cool when the story's actually interesting. And though Genshin Impact's lore is okay, the style of the cutscenes they show it in are pretty nice looking, but it's just very generically fantasy. But the lack of a fun main story makes it that the lore is not really worth going into. There are way more chapters and stories that were patched in, so maybe the plot and characters got a lot better. How long does it take to see it all? Jeez, yeah, I think I've had enough. Okay, just one more thing. This game actually has online co-op, which you're able to play with 4 players. It's not something I was expecting to be in the game, but hey, it's technically an online game. And it does make the experience way more entertaining.
Mini, mo.
It isn't perfect by any means. You lose your ability to do certain actions in the game, including not able to activate the waypoints that extend the map, but normal waypoints are fine, so what gives? Also, when I'm recording this, there's no PvP mode, which is like a no-brainer for this game. The multiplayer is something that still needs to be updated, but right now it's still a fun addition to an overall soulless experience.
And that was Genshin Impact. And was it the worst game ever? No, there were some genuinely good parts about it, mostly with the music, but playing with co-op I did have a good time with it. I understand why this game gets so many awards. The fact I compared it to mostly console games instead of most of the junk you can see on your phone is impressive, and you can tell that there's a lot of hard work from the developers to the point where the game's director and CEO of QuiLliXs started crying at an event because people were negative towards the game, which makes the gacha mechanics far more jarring. From the outside, Genshin Impact's inspired by Breath of the Wild, but when actually playing it, you can see it doesn't take its main core of freedom to make every playthrough unique. Genshin's core is to make people spend more money, which sadly has worked on many people, but for me, tied with the non-fun combat and how much of a time waster it is, just put me off. This isn't a bad game, but a boring, generic, and a pretty predatory one, and that's not taking the fanbase into account. I'm gonna say D tier. Well, I guess the world is back to normal, which is nice, and I think getting my aggression out on a Chinese gacha game really helped my mental health, and because of that, I don't think I need better help for a while. I just hope nothing like this ever happens again.
Strongest champion to 50 and 5-star ascension. Raid Shadow Legends just celebrated their 3rd anniversary of being one of the top RPG games out there. Raid is always adding new content and game modes every couple of months to keep things fresh, exciting, and fun. Also got the Doom Tower with over 120.
3, 2, 1. I
always thought I might be bad. Now I'm sure that it's true. Cause I think you're so good. And I'm nothing like you. Look at you go. I just adore you. I wish that I just adore. What makes you think I'm so special?
What makes you think that I'm special? If I could begin to do some of the things that right by you, I would do about anything. I would even learn how to love.
I'm singing when I see you, the way you look, shaken by how long it took. I could do about anything. I could either had a love.
What you looking at, pervert?